Hello, and welcome to the More Than Digital Marketing podcast, your podcast about digital marketing and so much more. I am your host, Matt, and I am joined today by...
I'm Joe.
Hey! And this is Joe's very first Optix podcast, so be nice. Welcome him along. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Yes, you?
Good. Yeah, very well, thank you. Good. So Joe is a new addition to the Optix Solutions team. He's joined as SEO Lead. You joined how long ago?
I'm in my fourth week.
Fourth week.
So pretty fresh still.
Yeah, but hitting the ground running, absolute asset to the team. And yeah, really excited. Obviously, it has been really exciting to work with you. Really excited to work with you going forward. And also just get your hot takes on SEO on the podcast as well.
Indeed.
How are you finding things generally?
Yeah, it's been good. Yeah, been a bit of a whirlwind first few weeks. Definitely straight into the deep end. I think I had a client meeting on day 2, which was straight into the swing of things, which was good. But yeah, really enjoying it. It's a really great agency to work for so far, and looking forward to getting stuck in more over the coming weeks.
Nice. Saying all the right things as well. So, and my follow-up question was going to be, and how are you finding the world of SEO at the moment?
Yeah, SEO is always fun. I've been doing SEO. It will be coming up 10 years by the end of this year. So yeah, it's been a while. I did it straight out of school.
Nice.
It's changed a lot, but I think the challenge of SEO is probably the side of it I enjoy the most. It's always changing, always evolving. There's always new concepts to get your head around, and I think for me that makes it kind of the most fun area of digital marketing. That's a hot take, but in my opinion, SEO is the funnest. Yeah,
we like it. You're in good company here. Maybe not so much out in the main office in the Wild West out there, where there's PPCs in the world. But it'd be really interesting to get your thoughts on what you think the biggest changes, or like over the past 10 years, like how things have changed specifically. What was really important then, less important now, and now what's like the thing that you need to worry about?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, when I first started working SEO, it was very much sort of looking at more of the basic stuff. So, talking about making sure that content is, has optimized keywords in it, and making sure that like titles are within certain lengths, and kind of the more basic stuff that you probably, start out with as an SEO junior even now. And I think what's been interesting over the last 10 years is seeing how SEO has evolved, becoming something that, it goes much beyond kind of just focusing kind of small technical things and the content side of things. It's more how SEO integrates with kind of the wider world of marketing, I suppose. I think back then it almost felt like SEO was kind of in an isolated kind of channel. It was like you did SEO or you did PPC or you did social, whereas now there isn't really any significant boundaries. And I think for me, that's kind of where SEO has grown the most. And I think it's interesting that as we look to the future of SEO and kind of what it means for people using SEO as a service, but also for us professionals who do SEO on a day-to-day basis, is how we can continue to evolve as quickly as SEO is evolving. And I think, with the introduction of obviously AI, which we'll go on to talk about, that's obviously kind of one of the biggest changes over the recent years in terms of how we, work in SEO. And yeah, for me, it's really interesting to get to grips with all of that.
I completely agree. I think it's also my favorite part of digital marketing. I haven't made a secret of that in the past. But yeah, I completely agree. And I think, just aligning on the fact that it used to be so isolated. You were, just, a function within a much wider team, whereas now it's, the lines are becoming more blurred. And like when we start talking about like brand and PR and like obviously content, but also like the website setup and things like all that kind of stuff, all feeds back in. And actually the SEO is, probably the most important part in some capacity.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So yeah, there we go. Not to toot our own horns too much. But yeah, like you touched on, today we'll be talking a little bit about AI. We can't not talk about it. And particularly in light of our recent lightning talk. So we hosted our lightning talk yesterday on AI. That was hosted by our co-founder Alistair and also Samantha and our team. By the way, sign up to our email newsletters if you aren't already, and you can get up-to-dates on the next lightning talks. They happen quite regularly. The next one is about social media and how we've helped a global company increased their engagement on social media. So that's a really exciting one with Barnaby and Lucy. But yeah, AI super important. We're still talking about that. And I think last week when myself and Jack were on the podcast, we were talking about specifically the March core update that happened, and sort of the outcomes of that, and what you need to do to sort of come out of that relatively unscathed, as much as possible. But also, what that sort of highlighted was the fact that there's probably a huge topic of conversation around best practice EEAT or Google Eat guidelines, which actually sort of feed into a lot of that and actually touch on things like, how to use AI, but sort of being careful with it, but also sort of the wider impacts of, I guess, your website as an entity. You'll be able to talk about this much more in a much more educated way. But how your website, how EEAT affects everything, and also every time you speak to someone about Google Eat, you have to qualify it by saying Google Eat EEAT. You can never just say one. So that's that. So yeah, really excited to get your take on it, but also sort of provide some really actionable tips for how clients can make sure they're adhering to these guidelines, because it's coming up more and more. How can I demonstrate my experience? How can I demonstrate my expertise? What makes an authoritative website? How can I gain trust, and in the eyes of Google, I suppose, but also sort of make it a conscious effort to be doing it, for your website. So yeah, really interested to get your take on that. But I suppose to start, are you able to give just a brief summary about what EEAT is?
Of course, yeah. So EEAT, bit of a mouthful, used to just be EAT, and then Google decided to expand it to put another element in it. So the 4 elements of EEAT are expertise, experience, authority, and trust. So they form a kind of package that Google uses to analyze the authority and trust of a website. So it essentially is a way for Google to try and improve its ranking signals by taking content, by taking different elements of a website and basically placing a metric on it to decide how useful that website is going to be to the user. So the idea being that if you were searching for a particular topic, you would be displayed results that are not only accurate in terms of, from a content and tech point of view, but also those results are provided by people who have a known knowledge within that industry or space. So a key example would be if it is a law firm, the person writing the content is a lawyer with 20 years experience. He has, extensive papers written online. He has, a good social presence on sites like LinkedIn. That's the sort of person that Google would place value on because he's written a piece of content. He has a great deal of experience and knowledge, and therefore, users who are searching for that topic can trust in him.
Yeah.
On the flip side, if I came along and wrote a piece on some kind of law, if there's a particular blog post or particular page that I was writing on, I have no experience in law, I have no knowledge of law, I have no expertise in law at all. So my value is going to be less of that than someone who has, spent significant time in the industry. So it's about presenting the user with as much detail and as much kind of authority as possible in that the user can trust that they are reading content and they are viewing results which are applicable and contain the right information, as opposed to information that has been crawled from the web by people who don't know what they're talking about, essentially.
Or AI, someone just put a prompt into ChatGPT, got an article back and posted it on their website.
Exactly that, yeah. And I think with the rise of AI, EAT has become even more important. We saw EAT introduced before sort of Chat GPT even became sort of a real thing, and I think now that's sort of hammered home how important EAT is to sort of overcome that AI generated content, which, as you say, we'll touch on.
Yeah. So using that as an example, going back to your example that you said there, you are not a lawyer, but you're writing a legal article. A lawyer with 20 years experience has written, say it's the same article, you've got like for like content. How can you demonstrate to Google, essentially, because that's who we want to be giving our signals to, right? How do you demonstrate that you have this, or you should be the trusted provider of that content, rather than you that has no experience, but
Mm.
you're an SEO, so you might know how to sort of game the system, as it were.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think there's a number of things that you can do from a physical point of view to implement in order to make sure that, if you are that person that's producing that content, you have experience behind you, you have the expertise in that field. There are things that you can do to sort of provide Google with additional information that would prioritize how your content and how your sort of expertise are displayed to the user. There are several Google kind of EAT checklists out there, one of which I've obviously created myself. And what it essentially goes through is a number of actions that you can take to shore up your EAT score, as it were, and just really enhance that sort of authority and expertise. So if we use the example in question, a lawyer who's written content, this lawyer over 20 years would have, dealt with several cases. There's no doubt he will be, registered to a professional body. He'll have case studies, no doubt, online or of various maybe, cases that he's undertaken. He'll have a professional background that will be able to be accessed by users on various, other sort of academic type websites. And these are all things that you can use as kind of ammunition, as it were, to shore up how Google views that article within EAT guidelines. Things like if we're talking about the law firm that he works for, they have a website he's producing content for. If that law firm has pages that include sort of meet the team pages, about us pages, if he has accreditations or award, then mentioning those will help. So it's all about providing Google with as much information and as much detail as possible to be essentially not convince, but kind of inform them that this person has these qualifications, he has this expertise, this is the content he's writing about. If a user comes across that content, they know that it will 100% be accurate, it'll be exactly what they're looking for, and that provides, a sense of sort of authority and a level that Google would consider sort of useful for the user.
Yeah, so you've got these on-site elements that you've mentioned. So again, like if you've got a lot of content sort of to your name, then great. You can add schema markup, make sure you've got those authorship signals going in. Sites and then you've got all of those different like awards, things like that. They'll all sort of be, I guess, in a way, Google sort of pick up them, create its web of, okay, that references this thing that's relevant in the sector, and all sort of ties back, so you get these specific citations across the board, and then you've got things like I guess testimonials and reviews pages, case studies, those kind of things on site. I think some of the other like wider, more holistic things that you mentioned are things like the privacy policy, your cookie policy, GDPR compliance, things like modern slavery statements, accessibility, make best practice, have these on your website, and that will sort of help from a holistic basis. And then you've got the offsite kind of stuff as well. So I guess if you're being linked to from case studies from other websites, or you have been nominated for an award, or you won an award, for example, from a relevant industry body, then likely that might be linked or at least mentioned on there as well. And that will be another signal to Google to sort of plug the gap and say, okay, this person is who they say they are. And also it's all sort of linked to this various thing. And then also do things like business social profiles, for example, play into it as well, and how much I guess that's probably a bit of a finger in the air question, but also how about if you're from a personal point of view, if you're sort of building your personal brand through LinkedIn, does that kind of stuff help as well? So if you've got team members that are talking about your business or talking about you specifically, and again, you're creating more of these threads on this web, does that also help?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think personal brand is a big factor of EAT these days. Particularly for industries where sort of that trustworthiness is going to be really key. Things like the law industry, things like healthcare. Where the information that users want needs to be really accurate. So I think building a personal brand on whether it is on social media sites like LinkedIn, whether it's through contributions to professional journals or relevant industry sites. From a marketing point of view. We have sites like Search Engine Journal, Search Engine Land. Regular contributors to that are seen as kind of experts in their field and experts in their industry, and that translates to whatever sort of industry that we're talking about wanting to build EAT score. So I think from a personal brand point level, really important to build that over time. with sort of as many contributions as you can. If you can host talks or webinars, if you can produce white papers, if you're regularly posting industry updates that are relevant to the topics that you're trying to knowledgeable in, then that's really useful. And then that also translates to, from a business point of view, it's you're building a personal brand, but if your business also has that presence, in terms of if they're attending events, if they are accredited with professional bodies, if the business itself is regularly posting news updates on their social channels, it's all these things kind of, as you say, form a web, and they combine to contribute to a strong EAT score.
Yeah, absolutely. So picking up, I guess, a little bit on what you were saying there, are there any specific industries that need to be really mindful of EAT? I think you touched upon lawyers. I think you touched upon healthcare. Finance, I guess, is one. So like accountants, things like that.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, I mean, as you say, those are kind of three core examples of EAT, and probably three of the best examples that you could think of to present an EAT case to someone. I think essentially any industry where the information that you're providing needs to be as accurate as possible in terms of that information the user is expecting to see needs to be completely precise. If anything, if there may be legal implications, if you're providing a financial services website, that information needs to be correct. Otherwise, it can lead to sort of negative impacts, both from a marketing point of view and from a wider point of view. So if you work in an industry where the information you're providing is particularly needs to be backed by an element of trust, then EAT is going to be super important. On the flip side, in industries where EAT may not have such a weight, if we're talking about an e-commerce site, for example, EAT may not be required as much in terms of gaining that enhanced organic performance, because we're talking about, say, I don't know, if I'm a website marketing computers, as long as my website is optimized from an e-commerce point of view, whether I have an expert who knows about computers and laptops, that necessarily won't have as much of a weight and impact as an expert who knows about financial services or is a lawyer working in that industry, for example. So I think as long as you're understanding the industry you're in and sort of the main requirements for that, and different industries will have sort of different focuses about whether EAT is at the top of their priority list or slightly further down. So you need to consider the information that you're providing to users, I think.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's really interesting. And presumably, like you said, it's important, more important for some industries than others. But would you still advise that every business that has a website sort of considers an element of EAT as part of their SEO digital marketing strategy, just to sort of set them on the right foundations, really? So again, like things like awards, things like reviews, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think no matter what business you are and what kind of digital marketing you are doing, I think EAT should play a big part in that. As we mentioned, in some industries and some businesses, it's not going to be at the top of the list. But I think if we're talking best practice, then it certainly should form a part of that. There's things like you mentioned, kind of having accurate business information on the site, whether it's through the physical site itself or whether it's via kind of Google My Business listings. Things like any awards, having social profiles, making sure your policies are up to date, regardless of what industry you're in. That all contributes to EAT, and whether it's a key part of your marketing strategy or not, as a best practice, I would always recommend spending time and focusing to make sure you get it right for your industry and business.
Nice. No, really, really good, really helpful. How much, sort of, I guess, to change lanes a little bit then. So we talked about sort of the content and the person behind the content, but how much does the quality of that content that you're producing, and presumably if you are an expert and you have these expertise, and again you're trustworthy, there will be a certain element of quality in inverted commas, because obviously the term is subjective, but based on the fact that we've had the recent helpful content updates, and there's been a few phases of that, how much does the actual quality of the content play into it as well? And is there advice that you'd give, say, someone that might have a massive bloated website, but actually they've got lots of content that isn't performing? Is there anything that specifically they can do to help improve their performance?
Yeah, I think the quality of the content still is of the most importance. I think if you are an industry expert, you're writing about a topic, you sort of have gone through the EAT guidelines and the EAT checklist, you feel like you fall into all of those, or you kind of can tick all those off. But then if you write rubbish content, it's not really going to make a difference. And that's kind of the truth behind it. Is you could be the biggest expert within your field. You can think, you go through kind of what you consider contributes to Google Eat and strong performance in that area. But then if the content you produce is rubbish, then it's not going to make a positive difference to your website. And I think sort of the recommendation there, and as you touched on, if you have a website that has sort of bloated up to the point where it has unnecessary amount of content, then a content cull is never a bad option. Obviously we're talking about kind of hypothetical here, depending on the size of the site, but I think quality over quantity is absolutely paramount with content. I've regularly seen clients over the past years produce very limited content that has performed really, really well and has actually outperformed kind of the rest of their site and competitor sites that have significantly more. And I think what that highlights is that combining that expertise with actually content that is well written, is optimized, is targeted in the right way is super important, and those two things combined are really going to make a difference. And if we're looking at a site with extra content, then there's no harm in getting rid of content, in my opinion. I know some people in the SEO world will probably shout me for that, but there is no harm in getting rid of content that simply isn't performing, that doesn't have its place on a site.
I think I tend to agree with you, to be honest. Like, if you have content but actually no one's seeing it, what is the value of the content? So I think also
exactly
I've certainly in my time advised audits and culls, or at least sort of maybe updates to old content to sort of keep it fresh or whatever. But also removing isn't necessarily always isn't necessarily a bad thing. And you can see performance metrics in Search Console and Google Analytics and things like that, and have specific data set to measure how good your content is. And like you say, if no one is seeing it anyway, then what difference does it make if you do cut it out? You touched on there as well, we've obviously got our framework and our checklist and things like that, which is really robust. Other things that I think people can use that might be really helpful are things like the search quality evaluator guidelines and going through that. But ultimately, I mean, that's where we come in and use our expertise to make sure that your website is geared up. So I think there's a wealth of information out there, but I think also please do, if you are confused about anything in relation to this, then obviously come to this. The other thing that again, touching upon what you were saying about the helpful content, is that making sure that you are answering a specific query based on the intent of that query is also going to be beneficial to the content that you're creating. And no, we're getting into the wider aspects of sort of SEO and things like that now anyway, so we can probably sort of we can leave that conversation for another day if we start talking about specifically around like content strategies and things like that, or link building strategies, things like that. Is there anything that you would add just on Eat, anything else, anything that we haven't covered that you think it would be really important for people and clients to bear in mind?
Yeah, I think the main thing I would sort of recommend when looking at Google Eat and reviewing it for a website is almost to think of it if the shoe was on the other foot. I think if you are that person, looking for information about a topic, who are you realistically going to trust? What is the content that you want to be seeing? Are you going to trust someone with experience in the industry that then links to, you can see they've got awards, you can see that they regularly contribute to the industry in general. That's the sort of person that you would trust. Whereas on the flip side, if you saw a random article about some financial advice, you wouldn't trust it. So I think you just need to think about what the user is seeing, how the user is thinking, and then thinking, how can I show to this user that I can be authoritative, that I can be trustworthy, and that I can show my experience to them so that they have, sort of full faith in what I am saying. And then that sort of will naturally kind of lead on to producing that good, optimized, effective content that's targeting the right areas, that's keyword optimized, and all the other kind of SEO optimizations that go with it. So I think just think about it from a user point of view, what you would like to see in a sort of piece of content, or in a sort of business that is providing a service that you want to know is fully sort of robust, and then go from there. That's always a good starting point.
Absolutely. And I think also, ideally you sort of hit these things and go through this checklist sort of very early on in your SEO strategy, but actually there's never a bad time to review and do a bit of an audit, and actually sort of tie things up so your website is a bit more robust in some of these things. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, obviously, as with all these things, it'd be good to get a jump on it from the start.
Yeah.
But if you're at a point where you've been, trying to optimize content and where you've been trying to kind of hit those levels from the start, but haven't quite managed it, then there's absolutely no harm in doing sort of a bit more of an audit and then ascertaining exactly what's required to kind of push that content to the next level.
Nice. I've got one final question, and it might be a bit of a difficult question, and I do apologise for that in advance.
That's good. I work in SEO. I'm used to difficult questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, it depends. So the question that I was going to have is how much should you consider your brand awareness and your brand visibility as part of EATS as well? So presumably a brand that is more well known is going to have more trust just by default anyway, isn't it? So how much does that sort of play into things, and how much do you need to thinking about sort of the bigger picture as part of your wider SEO?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question.
That's
like
3 times you've said that.
Yeah, that is. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I mean, as we spoke about at the very start of this, one of the things that I kind of said was I've enjoyed seeing how SEO has grown to being less of one channel to more of a contribution to, social media channels, to, interlinking with PPC campaigns, to wider branding and creative. And I think that stays true to your question as well. I've always said, when people kind of ask me about SEO and things like that is, you talk about brands like Netflix or Amazon, huge brands that are globally known. If they never did SEO in a day in their life from now onwards, people are not suddenly going to forget who they are, and I think that does bear true to a lot of brands and branding in general. And I think from a kind of, obviously much smaller branding point of view than that, it is really important to link that in with SEO. And I think that's where we start to see it all tying together. We're talking about specifically kind of EAT guidelines and a checklist and sort of optimizations you can make to ensure that you're kind of hitting those, points that Google wants you to hit. But then also, if we're doing all of that, but then your branding is not very good, there are negative connotations around it. Maybe you're, suffering from negative reviews or things like that. That will then negatively impact the good work you've been doing on that side. So it's really important to link all those things together. And, that's where we talk about SEO being much more than just kind of a singular optimization channel. It links in with branding actually sort of more heavily than people might realize. And I think branding and actually, EAT specifically go sort of hand in hand. We're talking about building trust to a brand, but if that brand isn't in a good place to start with, then that's also an area that we need to focus on, whether that's through creative, whether it's through kind of messaging and personas. So they all kind of tie in together quite nicely, really. So
perfect.
I think that was a good answer.
That was a great answer. I think also it's closed the loop as well. So we've called back right to the beginning. And yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it for our bite-sized guide on EEAT or Google Eat. So yeah, no, thanks for that. Really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks for your insight. I'm sure you'll be on many, many more podcasts. How was your first one?
It was great. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, really enjoyed it.
Nice.
And
it's being filmed for YouTube as well. So remember to like and subscribe on all the channels, all the social channels, not X. Remember to sign up to our newsletter. You can do that on the website, opticsolutions.co.uk/newsletter. Follow the podcast. Leave us a review if you like it. Rate us 5 stars as well if you really, really like it. And also, don't forget to get in touch with us at podcast@opticsolutions.co.uk or info@opticsolutions.co.uk. And if you have any specific questions, we can answer them on the podcast. But for another week, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
See you soon.